Don, tell me when you're ready.
He's rolling.
Okay, you're good?
Testing.
Yeah.
One,
Okay.
2, 3, 4, 5.
So just go ahead and start by introducing yourself and your connection to the island.
Okay. I'm Dale Brooks. In 1978, this was a Latin club called the Paradise Island, and they couldn't get people to come in. It was decorated as a Caribbean dance club, and my first exposure to it was I had been fired the first time that summer of '78, and my friend Ted Barwell was working in a movie theater down here by Sears, and he was desperate to find something else, and Phil Hicks was interested in doing some exposure. So he found out about the video, and so one evening, Ted and I showed up with a camera and a 3/4 inch recorder, and taped a set by a then unknown band called Chameleon, which had as its keyboard player a seminal musician named Yanni. The tape was surrendered to the management, and I didn't hear anything about it, and I didn't think that there was going to be anything to do about it. A few weeks later, Ted had the great idea of using this empty space as a punk club. Well, Phil Hicks was not real keen on the idea. He was still looking for something a little more sophisticated, but economics dictated that no one was going to come down to this area underneath the freeway. And so in this space right here where the cars are parked existed the island, which was a touchstone for many people of my generation. We had to make our own music scene, and eventually many name groups played there, although some less than others. And I was part of an organization called the Video Boys. And what we did was, right next door was the Texas Teacher Supply, and we could rent 27-inch color TV sets for $50 for a weekend, and put on a 3-day show, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then have the sets moved next door, and didn't really cost anything more than that. And we would put on a. Let's start again. The other two members of the Video Boys were Ted Barwell and my brother Glenn Brooks and Robert Barwell. And Robert Burtonshaw, who's no longer with us. Now, Burtonshaw went on to do videos and was the owner-operator of Numbers Nightclub for 3 decades. And I went to work for Channel 13 for 3 decades, and the only person that's a video boy anymore is my brother Glenn. Anyway, we would rent 27-inch TVs from the shop next door, bring them over to the club, and put on video shows. And this was like 3 years before MTV. And at first it seemed like just a little arc. We only put on a few special shows, and then people started asking for the Video Boys. And so there were several weekends where we just did just non-stop entertainment. The band would end, the videos would start spooling off. Next question.
So, tell me your favorite island memory.
Island memories. Well, there's so many of them. My favorite memory, of course, is not dying in a fire. The place was a glorious fire trap. It was badly wired. There was open ground throughout the club. Very poor lighting, almost non-existent air conditioning, and like I said, I'm just thrilled that we're not dead.
So, what impact did the island have on your life?
Well, the island, other than being a fan, not really much. We got a bus coming. Hang on. All right, 3, 2, 1. Other than being a fan, it just it honed my skills as a videographer, and I could shoot just about any kind of lighting or sound situation. Some of the videos that I've shot have gone on to be legendary, and I'm an award-winning filmmaker. So, but I've also produced about 20 records. But now I'm doing natural history films in the Texas Hill Country.
So, how long did you remain engaged with the island and maintain a music video exhibition?
Well, I was producing a band called the Hates at that time, and of course always pushing my band, and they were the very first band on the stage at midnight 1980. It was they were the headliners that night with Parents, the Vast Majority, Bevatron, which is Allison Fisher's punk group, and the Hates were the headline, and we had the TV show running between the acts. So the end of for about a year and a half, really.
What was the name of the company? Was it Splunge?
Splunge, the punk rock magazine. Yes, that was a bit of Monty Python that we had ripped off.
So you had a couple episodes that were.
Yeah, the last one was in 2004, and that's when we got original members of the Hates back together to talk about the videos that we shot actually in 77 and 78 before the island. Back in those days, we called it guerrilla television, and we really we're doing it as a lark. A lot of these projects were just because we had the equipment, and I always had a video camera. Early adopters. Back in those days, a black and white video camera with a porta-pack was about the price of an automobile. And so instead of, I got around on motorcycles exclusively, and by not buying an automobile, I was able to get a rather fine, at the time, video recorder, and I made a lot of films.
So you made films that were of editorial nature. when you talked to spoke of being a fan of punk rock music, other than the work that you did with Roots, can you talk a little bit about your status as a fan of music?
Well, Robert Kaner and Christian Arnheider had a radio show at KTRU that went over to KPFT called Destroy All Music. And so Christian always had the very latest punk rock records. Back in those days, we had what were called singles. And they were 7-inch pieces of vinyl, and you could subscribe to them very cheaply. I mean, $20, you'd buy a big stack of wax. And so if you didn't like the first two, well, hell, you'd love the 3 and 4. And you were introduced to all kinds of one-hit wonders. There are many groups that put out fantastic punk rock records, and you never heard from them again.
But what about punk rock music specifically that appeals to you? What is it? Why does it satisfy you to listen to punk rock music?
Well, I've been a rock music fan since the late '60s, but I've been waiting all my life for punk to happen. It was fast. It was satirical. It was it had social meaning, and it was cultural. We had to drag the culture kicking and screaming into the 70s and 80s, because it was pretty moribund and especially in this town, very hung up in the 50s and 60s.
Were you engaged with the island when they had its encounter with the police department with the support of the John Brown Society?
All right, that was later. That was after I had gone on to useful employment, and when you're working 5 days a week, you just don't have the time to sit up drinking. Say that just about that the island was a great watering hole. A lot of people, as a social meeting spot, it was unparalleled. You would walk in, and there would be pool tables up front, and then the bar, and then the dance floor would extend all the way to where the dumpster is now. And it was astonishing. The number of people we could get in to the island on a given weekend.
Tom, do you have any questions or anything like that you want to throw out?
No, I think just like I said, any particular stories that stand out that are really good, that would be really great.
Yeah, hone in on that. It was all good and well that surviving the weekend, but a particular memorable night or evening or incident.
I remember the nights as being very long. We'd get home about 2 a.m. Nobody had any money, so it was great. You could go see a show at the island for a couple of bucks. And so if you had $5-10 on you, you had drinking money. Drinks were cheap, and beer was even less expensive. And it was a place to see people and be seen by people. And a lot of the folks that I have grown up with, have equal memories of the island. And it's one of those things like high school, that everyone everyone was there, but were you conscious?
Good.
Let's see, a good island story. I don't really have any good island stories, except except I remember that a lot of bands would just literally show up on spec and go, we were looking for a place to play. Well, we'll put you on the bill tonight. Oh, well, we weren't expecting to. Oh, okay. And it started off that way. If you had a band, you had a venue at the island. Now there may not be more than a dozen people hearing you, but you were still playing legitimately on stage in Houston. Now the punk rock scene in Houston was very odd, because here we were stretched between two coasts. There wasn't a lot of cross-pollination between the Los Angeles scene and the New York scene with Houston, so we had to make it up as we went along. So there was a lot of the cowpunk influence, and then you had bands like the Hates, which were positively anti-punk. They were post-punk before it had a name. And of course, the Hates had been listening to a lot of British music, and especially the LA music, and then becoming familiar with the very serious, buttoned down New York City scene, which was very artistic, and of course it's had the longest legs of any of the punk movements.
How about the Austin scene? How's that?
Well, now that there was kind of a handshake between the Austin scene and the Houston scene. Many of the bands that played successfully in Austin would come down to Houston for a weekend, and we were always glad to see them. But I'm not sure it was. It just wasn't as easy in those days to pile all your equipment in one van and do a road trip. Now, one of the you asked about a legendary band that played the island, and that was the Dills out of Austin and Los Angeles. And the Kinman brothers were touring in a VW microbus, and they brought all their equipment, and it was just an honor to hear them for 30 minutes. They were so amazing, and I hope I still hope for their success.
Well, we got some good to work with material. Cool. Excellent.
All right.
Okay, we'll pop the jacket.
Oh.